You know, we need a message from God today. We need something very special. And today, I'm going to take some unusual steps to direct my spirit and my heart to a message about why certain people aren't being greatly used of God. There are a lot of youth that are in schools. Here now in a few days, I'll be at the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry talking to thousands of students. And they all have an aspiration and a heart to be mightily used of God. But it seems like something is wrong. And it isn't going to be today the typical bad-mouthing youth about their whatever. We're going to talk about heart to heart, what is holding back people from being greatly used of God. Now, this curiosity hit me very hard because one day I started looking at history. I noticed, for example, that there were clusters of greatness. At various points in the history of the world, people appeared, not one or two, but several at a time, that had astonishing gifts. Well, you want an example? How can we go any further than Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci? Those two perfected sculpture, paint, and science in a way that was truly indescribable, breathtaking. Their works, both of them, are priceless. But they knew each other, and they existed at the same time in history. I'll give you some other names: Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, and Handel, who wrote Handel's Messiah. These four men lived within a span, well, let's just say the only two were separated by 20 years in their lifetime. And yet, they arguably wrote the greatest music the world has ever heard. And to think that they appeared for such a brief moment, all at the same time. Another glaring example might be the Second World War. You had three generals that appeared together: Montgomery, Patton, and Rommel. Now, regardless of what we feel about Nazi Germany, Rommel was an astonishing field commander. So was Montgomery, and of course, George S. Patton was legendary. Why did they appear at the same time? Now, I'm going to get way more contemporary and way more narrow in my focus. I'm going to give you the name of three men. One is David Wilkerson, the other is Paul Crouch, and the third is Loren Cunningham. Not any of those names influence less than millions of people. Millions. Well, let's take them one at a time. Over 500 Teen Challenge Centers, the #1 selling Christian book in our time, Crossing the Switchblade, and the astonishing impact that he had and the amazing work that he did for God, David Wilkerson. Loren Cunningham, who's still with us, thank God, is one of the greatest missionaries of all time. He built Youth with a Mission, which now has over 26,000 people in the mission field. The third is Paul Crouch, who founded TBN, the Trinity Broadcasting Network. Now, these three men influenced tens of millions of people. And I'm going to be very honest with you. We are not producing giants at this time. We're not. And a lot of people like to blame certain factors and even come up with a conclusion that, well, maybe giants aren't possible. Well, they very much are. And today you might be one of those giants that I need to wake up a little bit, all right? So let's get in this and get into it deeply. In Acts 2, verse 40, in the Message Bible, the culprit is unmasked. The guy who's guilty of what I'm trying to tell you about, is his mask is torn off. It is the culture. It is the culture. It says in Acts chapter 2, verse 40, in the Message Bible translation, he went on in this vein for a long time, speaking of Peter on the day of Pentecost, urging them over and over again, save yourself, get out while you can from this sick and stupid culture. Now, right now, we have a man running for president by the name of Bernie Sanders. There's a hilarious irony to the fact that he will not win, because socialism will defeat him. Think about the irony of what I just said. He will be defeated by the very thing he's propagating. The reason is the Democratic Party has what they call 500 superdelegates. In other words, even though Bernie would earn votes, he would have them taken away by somebody who didn't earn them. And the irony of it is that young people believe that socialism is the answer, even though the hilarity of the chief propagator of socialism is being defeated by, hello, socialism. Now, let's look at you. Is your culture sick and stupid? Is your culture sick and stupid? And is it affecting you? Now, I'm not going to accuse you of these things. I'm accusing your culture. There's something in the cultural water that poisons a young person's ability to hear the voice of God, to respond to it properly, and to build something truly lasting. And that's what we want to look at. Number one is entitlement. I'm not accusing you of that. I'm saying that when you look at the university campus today and how easily and how widely and how vastly young minds are offended by things that don't matter. Like, for example, I was on the University of California, Berkeley during the 70s. They were marching against war, not frat parties that had many sombreros, and therefore everyone should be fired for being racist against Latinos. The hilarity of what they're mad about, the microaggression of what they're upset about, demonstrates a bankruptcy of a sense of cause. Now, let me explain entitlement. Entitlement can undermine your discipline in ways you might not have imagined. Say, for example, today you have a goal. You want to be used of God, and you're greatly on fire for God to use you in a mighty way. But what we don't have is what these men have. Let's mention the name again. Lauren Cunningham, David Wilkerson. Here's what they had in their culture. There was, at these three men, and I forgot to mention one fact that builds the entire argument. They were all in one Bible school. They were at CBI, which is what it was called, Central Bible Institute in Springfield, Missouri, at the same time. Think about that. These three men graduate, go on to influence tens of millions of people around the world, perhaps hundreds of millions. There was a culture on that campus. It wasn't so much academic. It wasn't so much that it had some special technology of the time or edge of thinking. There was something else. So if Peter's telling the people, save yourself from this sick and stupid culture, look at entitlement, what it does. Say you get a goal and you decide to go after that goal. Entitlement will give you a code in your subconscious mind that you're to try this for a certain amount of time, and if it doesn't work, you give up. And then you try something else because you're entitled to win. It isn't just a matter of feeling entitled to win. You're going to win within a certain amount of time. And so when that inner clock goes off, oh, it didn't work, here's what happens to you. Suddenly you're discouraged for reasons you should not have been discouraged, because your real enemy was your fantasy about how long it should take for things to happen. If you look at these people that I mentioned in these names, imagine Michelangelo's capacity to lay on a scaffolding for hundreds and thousands of hours, hoping to get one or two minute paint strokes. That, for someone that is texting, is an inconceivable thing. And yet, here's what's unfair about life. Even though culture changes, the values and causes of greatness do not. Now let's talk about something else, getting hurt feelings. I have watched this so often. Young people face their first resistance, their first shattering moment where something didn't go the way that it was supposed to. And it's like they're ill-equipped inside to surmount those feelings. They can't process the discouragement, the anxiety, the sense of failure that those feelings brought. And that's very dangerous. Now let's go back to something. The amount of time that it takes for something to happen. You never should have thought that it was going to happen within this time frame. Matter of fact, the men of old had no time frame. They believed in the certainty of what it was that God told them to do. Now let's talk about risking personal safety. One day I read something that Matthew Henry said when he was talking about the 24th chapter of the book of Matthew. He said, we cannot be safe so long as we are secure. Now I want to deal with that. What is security? Predictable, knowable money. Security is when I'm guaranteed a certain surplus so that I will never face danger. So here's ironically what Matthew Henry said. When you try to be secure, you're in danger. When you pursue divine danger in the will of God, you are safe. So safety and security become a real issue. A young person will look at this and say, I can't really risk. Well, David Wilkerson, for example, one day saw the trial of a group of juvenile delinquents that had murdered a handicapped boy. It so gripped him that he lost all sense of what it would mean if he lost his church, if he lost his ordination, if he lost prestige. He went to New York and began to work in the most dangerous situation. Now, we have a vivid example in our lifetime, Heidi Baker. Heidi Baker runs against the grain of the culture that she was raised in. She's not a product of the water, the air, or the encouragement of things around her. In fact, she goes against the grain. That's where we're going to talk. You need to go against the grain. Now, the final element of this that really does matter is vague vision. For example, do you know what God wants you to do while you're on the earth? If you would have asked these great men, and here's another cluster that I didn't even bother to mention. We have William Branham, Oral Roberts, T.L. Osborne, Catherine Kuhlman, all at the same time. This is arguably the greatest demonstration of physical healing that the world has seen since the book of Acts. And they all existed at the same time. Now here's an interesting clue. It seems that iron sharpens iron. It was the competition that Michelangelo felt to Da Vinci that drove them both to levels of performance that were beyond even human understanding. So we have a culture where we encourage one another to take the shortcut. We encourage one another to follow the line of least resistance. We evaluate our sermons to see who they're going to offend. We evaluate a career choice not based on prayer or the will of God, but the pull, the gravitational force that says, without saying it, great things are not possible. Powerful accomplishment is not within your grasp. This is going to happen if you do that. Don't leave the herd. Don't take the road less traveled. Stay with the main group. And this is what ends up happening. We end up the same way that iron sharpens iron, dullness sharpens sharpness and dulls the edge of everyone who's involved. You could literally be a part of a fellowship of young people that you are mutually dumbing down, taking the edge, and removing the power to believe in something clearly supernatural. Now, these great men that we've described and women of God had an undeniable, inflexible, and you could not talk them out of, and they could tell you in 25 words or less exactly what it was that they were called to do. Now that, my friend, is the power that we're looking for. Now, I'm gonna read a verse before I close, because I want you to know what you can do. If you're in a yard filled with chickens, you can't be an eagle. If you are constantly being drained by people who have microaggressions, have tasted the Kool-Aid of this entitled youth generation, you're going to find yourself suddenly waking up in middle age thinking, where did life go and why didn't I do the things that I thought I could have done with my life? So here's a verse. I'm going to read 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20 and 21. But in a great house, and that's what the church is, great house, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of hay, wood, and stubble, some for honor, also of wood and clay, some for honor and some for dishonor. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from the latter, he will be a vessel for honor, sanctified and useful for the master, prepared for every good work. Now, I don't believe you're lazy. I don't believe you're fearful. I don't believe that you're compromised. I believe that you are feeling the gravitational force of a sick and stupid culture. And breaking the hold and the force of that is what this verse is about. The culture doesn't have to win. The microaggressions don't have to deceive you. The sense of entitlement doesn't have to grip you to make half-hearted goals and set the stage for a life in the twilight and not in the full glare of God's glory. What do? Cleanse. Interesting word. Separate, cleanse. And what it really says is, if you decide to do it, if you decide to do it, and no one ever was greatly used of God without prolonged bouts of loneliness. And a loneliness that goes beyond just people not being around. It's an aloneness that can grip you in a crowd. Here's what Jeremiah said in the book of Lamentations. Because your hand was on me, I sat alone. Now that is a special and powerful moment. And you've got to understand the emotional schizophrenia that can tear you apart. You want greatness, but you want ease. You want to be used of God, but you feel this tractor beam of let's do it the easy way. Let's do it a way that I feel like I deserve. It's not you. It's the culture. It's sick and it's stupid. And in the name of Jesus, you can cleanse yourself from it. And you can decide right now, looking at me, you can decide right now, God can use me greatly. Even if there aren't others around me, God's power to make me a force in all of this mess is undeterred, unchanged, and it's utterly available. God bless you. I'm looking for greatness in you.